Alex Ortiz is one of our technical analytics technical specialists, and someone who probably knows more about Google Analytics than the rest of us combined. So who better to tell you about advanced things that you can do with Google Analytics than Alex? He has lots of experience. He works directly with our customers, and he's an overall awesome guy. So Alex Ortiz.
Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you, Avinash. Awesome. I don't know that I would put that label next to my name, but so thank you, everyone, for joining me. This is always an interesting time after lunch because, it can go either way. I can either put you to sleep or or everyone's limber enough where you're actually paying attention and kind of involved. So this is a really good time. The funny thing is the last couple of presentations that I've done has always been after lunch. I did a searchonomics talk after lunch, and that one didn't go as well. Nobody came to the room because everyone was still hanging out. So a little background on myself. I actually was part of the Urchin team. So I was one of the few that came on board, and I'm partly responsible for what is Google Analytics. Is that fair? My original role at Urchin was doing user support and user training. Coming on board to Google, that's basically what I also started doing here. Now I actually lead a support team that's responsible for helping out our advertisers and all of our standalone users use the product, understand the product, all the help content that you see out there. My team is responsible for building a lot of that stuff out. A lot of the good content and some of the bad content that exists out there in the Google world that's analytics related comes out of my team. So hopefully some of the content we cover here is useful enough that you can take this and actually have some action to take on at the end of this presentation or at the end of the day, at the end of the week. But what are we going to talk about? Analytics is a very cool tool. It's really easy. It's simple to use. It's easy to set up. Avinash talked a lot about how easy it is and how awesome it is and how much it doesn't suck, right? What I want to talk about is a little bit more detail about a few ways that we can use analytics for tracking what most commonly you wouldn't think about an analytics tool can track. You run into a feature matrix on products, and you get the PowerPoint, the marketing PowerPoint that sells you on everything that's there. But what I want to talk about is how exactly you implement some of this tracking stuff that might be most interesting for your sites and the type of sites that you're running. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to cover is segmenting the data. If you haven't heard, or if you weren't here this morning, then that's a shame. But Avinash loves data, loves looking at data, loves segmenting data. And everyone should love it too, right? Otherwise, it sucks. And analytics does an amazing job at segmenting the data that it already collects. Once you add the JavaScript tracking code to your site, we're collecting everything that we understand and collect. And we give you pretty much the most standard metrics that are available. Plus, you're also able to segment a large majority of the reports by 23 different factors. I can look at a keyword and I can understand where they're coming from. I can look at a campaign and I can understand what landing page they visited. So that's something that's already built into the product. But there's actually a lot more stuff that's available with just a few tweaks and a few ways of customizing how you look at data, how you bucket data, to give you even more insight. And I'm going to touch on a topic that Avinash has been doing or did earlier today. Segmenting the data through what I call segment filters. I'm rebranding what we have as profiles and filters in the analytics product as segment filters. But first, let's talk about what profiles and filters are. Analytics comes standard with what's available, 50 profiles. And all a profile is a way of looking at data in a certain aspect. So it's kind of like a bucket, almost like a box. I have a big box, and all of my analytics data goes into there. But then I can create a new box, and I can say, I want this box to look a little differently. I want to actually capture just organic traffic into this box. Or I want to remove any internal traffic that isn't really customer data, right? The cool thing about profiles is that you can define them and you can start collecting in there, and then you can start comparing how different types of traffic is actually interacting with your site, how loyal different types of traffic are to your site. So you have an analytics account, and this is just kind of a brief kind of idea of what it looks like, a little drawing here. You log in analytics, or you create an analytics account, and you start off with one profile. It's basically your website. You type in there www.mysite.com, and we create this bucket for you, this box. But you can actually create up to 50 more buckets or profiles in analytics, all with the product that's already there, without anything cool, new to add to it, nothing special you need to buy or anything along those lines. And in each of these profiles, you can add a filter. And I want to say that, well, I want a profile that just looks at the way that organic traffic navigates through my site. Well, I create a profile. I add a filter that just says include only my organic traffic. And then I look and I see through the tunnel that is the organic traffic. And I can understand a little bit better about how people are navigating to my site, how loyal this type of traffic is to my site. Are they consuming more content? Are they actually spending more time on my site? All these really cool metrics that Avinash touched on earlier. Or let's say that I want a profile that just looks at my referral or my affiliate traffic. Show me sites that are sending traffic over to my site, and that's it. That's the world that I want to see. We'll create a profile, we'll add a filter, and we'll start seeing that data. So just a couple steps. How do we do it? Well, quite easily, you first create a profile. The way you do that is you log in your analytics account, you click on the Add Website Profile, you go through the process of adding a profile for an existing website. You give it some parameters in here about what you want it to call this. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm creating a new profile that's dedicated to organic traffic. Now I've got my bucket. Then I go and I create a filter. So analytics provides a number of advanced filters. What we're going to cover here is just one type of filter, which is including and excluding certain types of traffic. So I go to add a filter. And then I tell analytics, well, what I want to do is, in this case, I want to just include organic traffic. And you have a list of different filters that you can use. We're going to be using the include filter type. And then I'm going to say, well, if any medium that's organic comes to my site, that's what I want to keep in this bucket. So why is this useful? And I can actually continue doing this and creating these new filters, these new profiles for different types of traffic that I want to look at. I think there was a question that was asked earlier on, which is, how do I see how different types of traffic is accessing my site, whether or not affiliate networks is doing certain things? This is the best way to do it. You create your profiles for the different types of traffic that are coming to your site. You filter on it, and then we look at the reporting. And this is where it gets really cool. Here's a site that gets pretty average amount of consumption or loyalty. You notice that I've got a number of visits that come only one time, 79% of my traffic. And I've got well, it's not a very distributed tail, but I've got a large chunk of visits that come in 2 or 3 times. This is all of my traffic for the entire site. Well, what does this look like for referral traffic or for organic traffic? Now with my new profiles that I've created, I can actually click on this report and check this out. Referral traffic, let me go back here. This is my all traffic. Referral traffic accounts for 91%. Or in this case, 91% of all my referral traffic comes one time. And the tail that comes behind it is they don't stick around. They don't come back to my site. They usually come once and they don't come again. And that's, maybe I'm paying for referral traffic. Is it worthwhile for me to pay for all this referral traffic if they're not even staying on my site? If most of the traffic that comes once and doesn't come back again? Now compare this to organic. And look at this. I've got a much longer and much more distributed tail. I have more traffic that comes more often. Well, sorry, I have traffic that comes more often. But you notice that I don't have as much traffic. The organic traffic that's actually coming to my site is a lot less. Well, what should I do in this case? Now you have insight. You now have action that I can do with this data. Well, maybe what I want to do is invest in more SEO tactics. And I want to invest less in some of the referral traffic stuff that I'm doing, less affiliate network traffic stuff that I'm doing. Right? But now I have the detail that shows me that. And I understand at this point that when I have organic traffic come to my site, they continue to come back. They don't leave and don't return to my site. This is cool. More insight. How much content are they consuming? The same site, all traffic. Most of my traffic comes and consumes about 1 to 5 pages on the site. Well, what does that look like with organic and referral traffic? Well, organic traffic, I actually have a lot of people that come and they consume more content. Well, I have a minimal amount of people that come because my SEO isn't so great. But when they do come, they actually consume a lot of content. Now compare that to referral. Referral, I get 66% of my referral traffic only views one page. And they usually stay on the, you see there's a breakpoint there about 4 pages, right? 4 or 5 pages there. They don't consume as much content. Is it worthwhile for me to actually spend the time to try to drive traffic from referral? Or would it be more worthwhile to actually have organic traffic come to my site? They consume more traffic. They come more often. Seems kind of logical. What would the next step be? Flash. Good old Flash. An interesting question that was asked earlier was, analytics is great and it tracks page views, but what about for sites that don't have any page views? Flash is a great example of this. Ajax is another example of this. We've got widgets and all these other things that we're integrating into our sites, and these cool, flashy, fun things that attract people to our site and hopefully keeps them, right? But how do you know? How can you use a tool to tell you this? Believe it or not, analytics can actually tell you how well some of your Flash content is performing. It does require a little bit of tweak to the Flash content itself. You do have to add a couple of JavaScript tags, a couple of events to it, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But then once you have that there, now you have the ability to actually create action on that type of content. And I've got a couple cool examples here. Well, the first one is, this is our own site. We have a Flash video about Google Analytics that tells you some of the cool features that Analytics has to offer. I think about 9 chapters it's on there. But at what point do people actually visit the Flash site and then navigate over to sign up for an account? Well, what I can do is, using Flash and some JavaScript, this is all the code that I need. I just add a little on-release Flash event. By the way, this is for ActionScript version 2, not ActionScript version 3, for those of you that are familiar enough with Flash. But I add a release, on-release, which tells me when someone lets go of their mouse button, I want to make sure that Analytics gets a sensor that says that they did something. In this point, they actually clicked on step 2 in the tour. Well, what happened next is then Analytics gives you the insight that then tells you they signed up. Well, that's kind of cool. If I can somehow get people to step 2 in my tour, they actually go and they sign up for the product. Here's another cool one. I love this site, the BMW Mini site here. Really flashy. It's really great. You hover your mouse over some stuff. It does some cool things. You hover your mouse over one of these quick model facts down here, and you get this little box that pops up, and it gives you more detail about the car. Really, really cool, right? Do people actually go and build their own car? Do they then go and submit their lead? Do they then go look for a dealer in their location? You can actually find that out within Analytics. And the way you do that is the same way you just tagged the last Flash. You just tag one of these buttons, tag the interaction, the click, the motion over, the hover over, the leave, and you tell Analytics, well, the minute that they do something on that, send us a little bit of data that says that someone completed an action on your site. This same tactic can actually be used on Ajax sites. On click, someone does something. Generally, what happens is an event happens on the site. Tell Analytics that something's happening. The way you do that is you just call this little JavaScript call. It's the urchin tracker function. And you'll recognize this urchin tracker function by looking at the Analytics JavaScript code that's already given to you. Urchin tracker is basically the workhorse. It collects detail about what's going on the site and it sends it over to the Analytics servers. In this case, what you're doing is you're telling Analytics that this is a Flash movie that talks about quick facts, and they're specifically clicking on the Mini Cooper site. If I can track every single event this way, then I can identify whether or not that hover over or that mini button that's there is actually leading people to reach out to their local auto dealership or get more information about it. Here's another cool one. We actually have a customer that's doing this right now. They have a Flash. And by the way, this isn't the customer they're working with. This is just an example. But they have a Flash movie player. And they want to know whether or not their users that are landing on their site are actually looking at all the content and trailers that they have on there. So what they do? Well, they tagged each of the events or each of the sections here when someone reaches a certain point in the movie with an urchin tracker call. When someone starts, it sends analytics a start message. When they hit the midway point, it tells analytics, hey, they've hit the midway point. And then when they hit the end, it tells analytics that they hit the end point. Where do you put your advertisement? Video ads are big right now. Where do you put your ads? At the beginning? At the end? In the middle? Where do they fall out? Yeah. So this is a really cool way of now understanding how people are navigating with your Flash movies. And then you can even do this with a goal, and you can create a funnel process that says, show me when people start watching the trailer, when they reach the 50% of the midway point, and then when they actually complete watching the trailer. Now I know where they're dropping off at, and where do they go after that? Do they click on an ad that I may have rolling on there? What do they do after that? Insight. Now you have that the ability to start identifying whether or not these Flash videos are actually even worthwhile at this point, or what you're putting in there is worth the time. So the next piece we're going to talk about here is tracking across domains. So analytics uses first-party cookies. Question that was brought up before was, some of the ways, I think this was a question that came up here today, but analytics uses first-party cookies to identify traffic. And it does that by launching a JavaScript, setting a cookie that uniquely identifies that visitor, and it keeps track of a specific session for that visitor. So long as the cookies are there, analytics knows that you're the same visitor. The cool thing about first-party cookies is that the website that sets it owns them. There's no third-party action that goes on here. In other words, someone else can't take your data, someone else from another domain. And by the way, third-party cookies, for the most part on a lot of browsers, are blocked. So we do a pretty good job of identifying visitors by using the technology that we do now. But what happens when your site spans across multiple domains? What do you do then? Do you call up and say, I want to use third-party cookies instead? No. We actually have a way of tracking visitors that cross over boundaries or cross over business sites that you may have within your network. I'm using Ford as an example here just because they have a really easy to see path. They have their Ford website, and then they have their Jaguars, their Volvo sites, Land Rover. Someone that comes to the Ford site, or someone whose campaign has driven them to the Ford site, may actually convert or go and search out a lead on the Jaguar site. But because we're using first-party cookies, and because most really good tools use first-party cookies, there's no way of tracking the visitor across both domains. Until, analytics comes around, and we say, well, it's no problem. Actually, what we'll do is we'll just modify the code slightly by adding two sets of lines here. There's a UDN equals none and a ULink equals 1. And what this does is it tells analytics, expect for you to have to take the cookies that have been set for a given visitor and move them over to another domain when I tell you to do that. The next thing we do is then we tell our website that whenever you're actually going to move to that other website, call this function here called the UTM Linker. And what this does, the UTM Linker is a really cool tool. It takes the cookies that exist on the current domain, in this case Ford.com, and it sends them over, wraps them up, and sends them over to Jaguar.com. In the URL, you'll actually see some cookies in the, so you'll see what exactly analytics is transferring. The receiving site, the receiving JavaScript, then reads the URL and it says, well, you already have cookies. And rather than me identifying you as a new visitor, I'm going to identify you as the same visitor that just came from Ford.com. You keep the same campaigns that drove you to Ford. You keep the same visitor identifier. And now I know you as the same visitor. This is really cool because now absolute unique visitors is no longer tied to just the domain. You can actually tie this absolute unique visitors to your entire network of sites. You can actually transfer these cookies around as your users are navigating through your site. Now, one warning, this is a little tough. This is not an easy process. Namely because the UTM Linker function does have to work on the click itself. When someone clicks on a link to go over to Jaguar, that link, that click itself is what causes the action of transferring the cookies around. This is really easy on some of the smaller sites that exist where you can actually add these on-click events on the href, either through your content management system, but it's really difficult on large sites. there are some hacks that you can do using the DOM to basically go through your hrefs and tag them already, which makes it a lot easier to do. OK, capturing e-commerce transactions. Now that we understand how to identify and keep traffic identified uniquely as they traverse through different domains, let's say that I've got my e-commerce engine sitting on a totally separate service or a totally separate domain. Let's understand here how analytics actually captures e-commerce data. Because having a silo of how many transactions I make and having a silo of traffic that's being sent to my site, without those two married, it's really difficult to understand whether or not your keywords are actually leading to something being purchased on your site. The cool thing is that analytics does provide an easy enough way to try to provide that e-commerce data right into the product itself, and then ties a visit and a click to your ads to a final conversion in a product. By the way, this is also in the Help Center. Couple of easy steps. This is the first easy step. Actually, I think this is the only easy step. But if you do want to enable and you do have an e-commerce website, the first thing you want to do is turn on e-commerce website. You do this by clicking on the Edit Your Profile link. There's a little button that says, do you have e-commerce? Yes or no. And all this does is it turns on the e-commerce reporting. If you don't have e-commerce reporting turned on, when you log into analytics, you don't see anything that's e-commerce centric. You don't see a tab that says e-commerce. You don't have sections. The next thing you do is you tell analytics, or you tell your receipt page that you're going to send data to analytics. You have your normal tracking code that analytics gives you. And then, here's the unique part. And this is where your technical person or your e-commerce engine developer comes into this. You tell analytics how much a particular transaction netted you and the receipt page itself. So generally what you would do is on a receipt page is you would display, well, here's what you paid and here's where I'm sending it to. You do the same thing, except instead you box this up into a transaction form that analytics can understand. And then you tell analytics to send that data to our servers. Now what you can do is you get all these really cool metrics that tell you how much you're making from sites that's coming to you. For example, here, I just clicked on the e-commerce tab, and now I know, and by the way, this is on googlestore.com when we were making money. Google.com netted me $946.75. Fatwallet.com, what do we have here? $26.30. Right? So now I understand traffic that's being driven to my site is actually either making money or not, based on what actual transactions are happening on my site. Now I can tie the visitor flow, the visitor navigation, what they clicked on, all their interaction that they have on my site, with exactly what they did on my site. SexyLegsPlaygirl.com. No revenue. That's probably good. So, for those of you that did fall asleep, and I don't fault you because it is after lunch, what did he say? A couple of things. All this is just a summary. Segmenting is the key to insight. Avinash loves segmenting, and for good reason. Once you understand how traffic is navigating to your site, and you can specifically look at a profile or a type of traffic, you can then have insight onto that type of traffic. Use your new profiles. Use your 50 profiles that you have up there. They're there for you. They're for free. And create filters to identify the types of traffic that are navigating to your site, and get a better understanding of how that traffic is interacting with your site, whether or not they're sticking around, how loyal that traffic is. Anything that's an event can be tagged. It doesn't matter if it's Flash. It doesn't matter if it's Ajax. If it's an event that happens on your site, you can tag it, and you can tell analytics that something happened at that moment, either through a JavaScript on-click event, through some other method that you may have for your Flash, whatever it may be. Tell analytics that something's happening and track that action, because that action is probably going to lead to someone converting, or is going to lead to someone doing something on your site. And you may want to know that, and you should know that. Just because analytics uses first-party cookies doesn't mean you can't track visitors across domains. Using the UTM Linker function, and by just modifying a few snippets of code, you can actually track how a visitor is navigating through your site and finally converting and keeping that absolute unique visitor absolutely unique across your domains. And then e-commerce data can be tied to your advertising. Lonely data is useless data. What is that, Palm? Avinash has this, I I'm not even going to try it. But lonely data is not useful. Silos are not useful. Tie the data together. Marry them. Tie how visitors access your site, how they come to your site, with how much they're actually spending on your site. And understand what real ROI is. And that's it.